Today, Byline Scotland interviews Professor Fionn Stevenson, convener of Albert Street Action Group in Dundee. So Fionn, thank you very much for being here with us today. And to start off, tell us a bit of who you are, your background, so our readers and viewers can get to know you more, if you don't mind.
No problem, sure. I'm a professor of sustainable design, and I guess I've been interested in ecology and sustainability for a long, long time. I've also been an activist all my life, a lot of peace activism, and then moving on to environmental activism. And I've made Scotland my home, and I've made Dundee my home. So that's me.
Oh, great. Fantastic. And tell me, how did the Albert Street Action Group get formed? Or like how the idea of creating one originated?
Sure. So Dundee, like many cities in Scotland, is engaged in a process of so-called community consultation. And I mean, the word consultation is very problematic because, I mean, Sherry Arnstein has a famous theory of participation. And at the top of the ladder, you know, participation is when the authority tells you what they're going to do. And at the bottom of the ladder is when the citizens take power for themselves and they inform themselves and they take action. And, you know, then there's somewhere in the middle of the ladder is where citizens are trying to do things and top-down authorities are, you know, also trying to do things, and you kind of meet in the middle. So I guess we've been in that kind of middle space in the neighborhood where I live. So there's a lot of actions coming top down to us from both the national government and the local council. And at the same time, we have a really powerful community in Stobswell in the east side of Dundee. And we have a lovely kind of community forum called Stobswell Forum, which has been going for many years now and has a good reputation. However, Stobswell Forum, like many community councils, tries to work within the normal boundaries of consultation. And a number of us, I'm a trustee within the Stobswell Forum, and a number of us became quite frustrated with the type of consultation process that's going on in the city, because although in theory it's meant to empower us, it actually feels very disempowering because we spend a lot of time being consulted at, and it takes up a lot of our energy. And really very little seems to happen as a result of the consultation. You know, it often feels like it's token and it's kind of the decisions have been made. And we're just there as the citizens to tick the box. So I guess because of my previous activism in other environmental action groups, you know, I said to some folk in the area, look, you know, maybe we need to take a different tack and set up a small, very agile, very nimble group, an action group that actually is prepared to operate right at the edge of what's legal. And maybe sometimes not quite legal, but, you know, to take some direct action. So really the group is very much about direct action, and it has a very clear focus. And the focus is to drive from the bottom up and to empower the local community through a genuine co-production process where we're co-producing together the transformations we want to see in our local neighborhood. And I guess we focused on the Albert Street as a, you know, some people said, well, why are you just focused on one street? I mean, that's a tiny unit to work with. But all my life experience tells me that one of the most powerful places you can work is right where you are, in your place, in your street, and that level of action is very profound because it's at a level where people can get to really know each other, and it can build up a lot of trust, and as a result, a lot of dynamism. So that's why we chose to set up this small group, which is just focusing on our local high street. And, you know, people can join it if they're interested, and if they want to do something bigger or wider, they can stay with the wider community forum.
Yes, and in this way, the energy gets concentrated, and then it's probably more.
I hope so.
No, it's great. And if I'm not wrong, this street is part of A929, or it leads to A929.
Yeah, it's notionally a kind of what they call an arterial road. I mean, there's a lot of contradictions in Dundee with the transportation strategy, because, you know, on the one hand, the council has been asked to implement 20-mile-an-hour zones and to try and slow down the traffic, calm it down. You know, we all know that 20-mile-an-hour zones reduce accident levels massively. You know, they introduced a 20-mile-an-hour zone recently in London in the main arterial roads. And, you know, the accident rate for pedestrians went down 63%.
Wow.
In 1 year. I mean, phenomenal, you know, so here we are, Dundee's mandated to introduce these zones, and guess what? Stobswell isn't getting one. Or at least it's not on their map. Now, we think we've managed to maybe persuade them to change their minds. Maybe the council will change its mind in the autumn, we'll see. But, you know, that's kind of one of the reasons why Albert Street is so interesting, is because on the one hand, the council says, yes, you're a major district shopping high street, you're a shopping centre, you know, so you should be afforded all the support that a shopping centre gets, calm the traffic, help the people, help the shops, help the pedestrians. And on the other hand, we're still calling this a major arterial route, even though Dundee has a perfectly good ring road, right, to take traffic away from places where pedestrians need to have priority. So yes, Albert Street is a so-called arterial road, but actually it's so easy for the big trucks and the intercity buses to just go around the ring road like they're supposed to. I mean, here's the biggest contradiction. There's a sign at the top of Albert Street, at the top of Forfar Street, which is just in front of Albert Street, that says, you know, traffic should go round the ring road, you know, through traffic should go round the ring road. But on the other hand, there's also a sign saying this way to the city centre.
Oh,
so,
typical.
You know, and so, yeah, and so, you know, we're sort of trying to think of actions that will really focus the council's mind on the contradictions it's presenting to its citizens, and to, you know, try and get them to let go of old thinking. There's some folk in the council that are still prioritizing the car.
Yeah,
you know,
nowadays, yes.
This kind of thinking is so old-fashioned for cities. Sure, in the countryside, you know, people may well need cars, but in cities, you have park and rides, good public transport systems, bike, walking, scooters, you know, the car should stay away, really.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes I wonder, with what we see, that like what council can do, that the ones that are coming with the ideas don't have any practical knowledge about it, maybe doesn't know even properly the area, and it's common, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean, they're doing the council are doing a consultation exercise in tandem with a consultant about developing active cycle routes into the city. And, you know, part of that cycle route is near Albert Street, but again, just no thinking. No, and when we do talk to them, they ignore us. This is not the council, this is the consultants. So, you know, again, we have to do some direct action to focus their minds.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I presume, with your background, sustainable housing design, several publications on the field, and your academic appointments, you might have a previous influence with government policy. Is this the case for this group movement? Is it already happening? Are you seeing any?
Not yet, Patricia. I mean, it's early days. You know,
Yeah, that's
we've
because of
only been formed for a few
April.
months, and so far we've only had one major event. We've had one big public meeting, you know, where we got a lot of people together, and this is we've got this next a big event coming up, a visioning event. But I would say what we're trying to do at the moment is really get to know our place, you know, and get to know our people. And, you know, my experience of doing previous actions like this, I was involved in a very successful campaign to challenge Fife Council in the past about their housing planning policy for Fife. And my experience of doing that is, you know, the biggest asset you have is your people. Yeah, and your place. But you know, the biggest asset is your people. So the first thing you have to really do is develop the people, the group, the trust, and the understanding. And you know, then we can begin to think about how we move on to a you know, tackling national government. And you know, that the tackling of national government, I've done a lot of national policy work through my academia work. To be honest, I'm pretty tired of all that. You know, and it's one reason I'm kind of reverting more to my earlier activism, because having spent decades and decades doing research and process development for government publications and whatnot, and advisory boards and everything, sometimes actually what you need is just some straightforward activism to really sharpen people's minds. And you know, the edges blur between research and activism. I mean, you have to do research as an activist, but sometimes I think the kind of academic reports just get put on a shelf. And you know, whereas when the activists grab a headline somewhere, you know, that makes a politician sit up and think, oh, you know, maybe I should pay attention to this. So I think, you know, we want to eventually reach into the kind of political sphere, you know, with the MSPs and as well as reaching into the executives, you know, through the officers. But the way we're going to get attention is by facts on the ground, doing things, you know, showing that we're a force to be reckoned with, you know.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's completely right, definitely. Because I feel as well that academia, we developed lots of things, but it's not always that they are put into practice at all. And it's so sad. There's like years and years of studies and
and sometimes it's about hearts and minds and you know, channeling emotions into passion and passion into productive energy and people on the street, you know, and it is people on the street and making governments realize that there is an energy and a passion in a neighborhood, and it's not going to sit down, you know. And what it's going to do, what we did in Fife was, you know, we had lots of little villages, you know, there was energy and passion in my village, and then that passion became kind of infectious to other villages, and then we formed a federation, and then suddenly Fife Council had this federation of action groups, and it was like, whoa. You know, and now they're going to Parliament with a petition, and they've got thousands and thousands of signatures. Oh my God, it's on the news, and what's happening? You know?
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah,
definitely is the way to go, isn't it?
Yeah,
yes. Yeah, this action group is of vital importance, isn't it? Not only for the well-being of the community, but also for what we are living now, climate crisis. And we would expect the government give a great support for the cause, isn't it?
yeah, there's some ironies. I mean, the national government have produced a national planning framework. It's called National Planning Framework 4 for Scotland. And, you know, that just came out, you know, last year, this year. It's still kind of being developed in some ways. And this national planning framework is meant to be much more citizen friendly, you know, doing all the right things, talking about climate change. But, you know, there are holes in it. There are serious holes in it. And, you know, part of the big hole in it is the participation process. And they're actually just doing a consultation now on participation. Well, the first question in my mind was, shouldn't you have done that consultation on participation before you develop the national planning framework?
Yeah.
You know, what is this? It's so back to front.
Mhm,
So, you know, so I have a lot of respect for some of the things that the Scottish government does and you know, some of its initiatives.
mhm.
And I know the politicians work really hard. But sometimes I feel like they're trapped in their own structures of thinking, and it's still this top-downness. It's still, well, let's plan for Scotland and consult after. Or if we're going to consult, let's consult in the old-fashioned way where we get our consultants to produce ideas and then test them on the citizens. That's no way to work. You know, the consultants are often pretty clueless about places.
Yeah.
And it's a much
Definitely.
more powerful and humbling process when the consultants are made to co-produce with the citizens. You know, that, you know, I think that would be a much more enriching process and would save a lot of heartache. You know, it would save consultants making mistakes.
Yes. Just for me to be certain of, in your press release, you mentioned about the collective desire to re-engineer and regenerate for residents and businesses alike. Would you be able to expand on this for us, just so I can?
Yeah, so the idea of working from the bottom up is really trying to involve all the different stakeholders in the area. So Stobswell is a really diverse area. It's a very poor area. You know, it's very ranked very highly in the social deprivation index. It's one of the poorest areas in Scotland. And at the same time, it's one of the most resourceful areas. I mean, that's often the way that the poorest areas are the most resourceful. And so we have a huge variety of people in Stobswell, you know, many different communities. We have many different nationalities, many different religions. We have people who've lived in Stobswell all their lives, and their grandfathers have lived there, and their great-grandfathers. And then we have people who've just moved there 6 months ago. And then we have all kinds of people. We have people renting housing, people owning housing, people working there. You know, we have professionals, we have shopkeepers, we have people doing sport. You know, it's like a microcosm. Stobswell is like a real microcosm of society. And so it's really important for Albert Street that with our Albert Street Action Group, we bring all the stakeholders along with us. So very often different groups within a community get left behind. So for example, it's very important that, you know, the Sikh community is involved. Yeah, the Muslim community is involved. The people who rent homes are involved, not just the house owners, not just the landlords. And a really big part of the community is those who are struggling to survive on the high street, the people who actually run the shops, the little shops, the independent shops. You know, these guys are the lifeblood of the community. You know, if these little guys weren't there, the community would have no heart. You see so many villages and they have no shop.
Exactly.
And they're not a village, they're just a dormitory for commuters, somewhere to sleep. But you know, Stobswell has a strong beating heart in the high street. But when I go up and down, you know, with others and we talk to the traders, we do a lot of talking, and you know, they have really big challenges. So they know what this high street was like. Many of them have been on the street for decades, and they know what it was like 40 years ago, and they have seen it go like this, you know, in the last couple of decades with austerity, you know, with the Tory government. The Tory government affects Scotland, you know.
Oh, definitely.
The poor Scottish government gets blamed for all the problems, but the Scottish government, because we haven't got independence, is just passing on the Tory policy. So they can never be, you know, truly authentic. You know, they're always going to be playing the mouthpiece to the Tories. So, and then this gets passed down to the council. So the council is now making huge cuts.
Yes.
It has to. It apologizes for that. You know, what else can it do? It's making huge cuts because its budget has been cut because other budgets have been cut. And so what the traders want is they want investment in the area. You know, they want private and public investment. You know, they want people to invest their time, their money, you know, their resources. And at the same time, they want to see a lot of things change in our high street. You know, they want to see less traffic. They want to see the high street as a more friendly place for people to be. And they want support with things like safety issues. You know, we know that the lighting, and a simple thing, a really simple thing, you know, the hairdresser said to me, wonderful hairdresser, cuts my hair, you know, she said to us at one of our meetings, she said, you know, this is, when I talk to all my customers, the biggest thing I get back is one word: fear. One word, fear. And it's like, oh my God, fear. And she said, yeah, she said, fear to walk up the street at night because the lighting is too dark. Yeah. And, you know, fear because there are, you know, some drug problems. Everyone's quite open. There are some drug problems around the area. And it's like, well, how do we collectively deal with that? So, you know, we've got to involve everybody, and it means not just the environmental issues. That's the tip of the iceberg. You know, underneath that is the social and economic issues for the area. So, you know, we have to look at all three of those areas together. So that's what we mean by, you know, bringing the communities. It's not just a community, it's the communities within the community together, you know, all together.
This is fabulous. It's a brilliant group that you're forming, seriously. And I think I really wish all the best luck to you. It's so important, and the way that is being thoroughly thought is the way to go, I think.
I hope so. I mean,
showing the power of the community.
Let's see what's happening on the 29th of June at our visioning event. But, you know, that's the next step.
Definitely, yes. And I wish you all the luck on the next meeting and forward. Yes.
Thanks, Patricia. Thanks very much.
You are very welcome.